When we look at the economy of North America, it was quite a bit different from what develops in Latin America. First off, the fur trade was extremely important, and especially for the French. The main motive for the French colonies over here in the Americas was the fur trade, and so they set up trading posts and they traded with the Native Americans who went out and trapped the animals and brought them to the French and traded it for French manufactured goods. And so this is going to have a huge impact in North America. First off, it has an impact on the environment as animal populations decline in certain regions, especially around the Great Lakes regions. Second impact it's going to have is it's going to lead to an increase in conflict between Native American groups because groups like the Iroquois traded furs with the French. Well, as the animal population declined in their own territory, well, that forced them to expand a new territory. And that's going to bring them into conflict with other native groups like the Huron Indians. And so it's going to lead to an increase in Indian wars. Aside from the fur trade, our other settler colonies are going to develop plantations similar to Latin America. But instead of relying on sugar production, they're going to rely on other cash crops. For example, the middle colonies are going to come to rely on tobacco. And tobacco is going to become very popular back in Europe. And so that's going to fuel this demand for tobacco. And so colonies like Jamestown become profitable by growing tobacco. Then in the southern colonies, their economies tended to revolve more around rice and later cotton production. And so initially, with the spread of these plantations, they did need labor, but most of that labor came from indentured servitude. And these indentured servants would agree to work off their passage to the Americas. And so typically they agreed to work for between 4 to 7 years. And after they worked off their passage to the Americas, they were free to pursue their own endeavors. And initially, indentured servitude was enough to fill most of the need for labor. But as plantations continued to spread, they needed more labor, and ultimately that's what's going to lead to the importation of African slaves to come and work on these plantations. Look at religion in the Americas. The Spanish were very active when it came to trying to convert the natives to Christianity. They set up schools, they set up churches, they actively worked to convert Native Americans and taught Native Americans not just Christianity, but taught them European farming techniques and herding techniques. And the church actually becomes one of the few protectors of Native Americans over here in Latin America. When it comes to the French and British settlements, they didn't try as hard to convert the natives, and overall they were much less successful when it came to trying to convert the natives to Christianity. The English really didn't show a whole lot of interest in trying to convert them. The French tried, but just didn't have as much success as the Spanish. Changes in North America. We talked a little bit about the French and Indian War because it's going to merge and become part of the larger 7 Years' War. But the French and Indian War was started when the British and the French competed for territory in the Ohio Valley region. And as both sides were expanding, they were fighting over this territory. And it's referred to as the French and Indian Wars because the natives are going to side with the French because they had a better relationship with them. And they were hoping the French would win and they could get back territory that they had lost to the British. And again, the French and Indian War kind of merges and becomes part of the larger 7 Years' War. Well, when Britain wins the 7 Years' War, they get most of French territory in North America. And that's going to have a big impact. But one of the biggest impacts it has is it causes Britain to begin to increase their control over the colonies in North America. Because after the 7 Years' War, Britain is now in a lot of debt. And they felt that the colonists should help pay for some of that debt. Not just the debt from the French and Indian War, but it also took a lot of money to keep a military and a bureaucracy over here in the colonies and defend the colonies. So That's when they began to tighten their control over these colonies, and that's when they began to raise taxes on the colonists. And of course, as Britain tries to tighten their control on these colonies and begins to raise taxes on the colonies, that's going to lead to resentment and ultimately leads to the outbreak of the American Revolution.